This is a presentation on some of the forms we need to know. It helps if you understand how SSIC codes are organized. And if you haven't watched a presentation on that one yet, I recommend you start with that, because the idea here is to try, at least with some of the forms, to try to give you a reason, an understanding of why they're labeled that way, so you're not just trying to memorize random numbers by rote memory. 1000 series pertains to military personnel. 13, right, when we add the 3, the secondary number 3 has to do with assignment and distribution. One of the instructions in our bibliography that we have to worry about that's a 1300 series is the 1300 2 alpha EFMP and suitability screening. And some of the forms we come across are the NAVPERS 1300/16. And if we remember, that one is the report of suitability for overseas. This is the screening your command needs to sign off after you get your medical screening done, saying that you're suitable for overseas duty or remote duty, for remote duty. Also, some forms in this instruction were the NAVMed 1300/1. So notice this is now a Navy medicine form. The other one is NAVPERS because that's your command saying you're good to go overseas. Well, the NAVMed is the actual medical, dental, and educational suitability screening. The NAVMed 1300/2, well, that's a screening checklist and work list that goes along with that. And another form mentioned in this instruction was the NAVMed 1300/3, which is a medical assignment screening. And this is something that's requested from NAVPERS when somebody has an unresolved issue pertaining to limited duty or a physical evaluation board. Moving on to some important things we need to know about the 6100 series. So 6 obviously makes it medicine, right? And the secondary number 1, that pertains to physical fitness. So we're going to talk about forms that fall under physical fitness. The NAVMed 6100/5, well, that is our medical evaluation board, our abbreviated medical evaluation board report. This is a form that a medical evaluation board will use to put somebody on limited duty. So if you think about that, that is not somebody who's physically fit for full duty. So NAVMed 6100/5, abbreviated medical board report, puts you on limb duty or temporary limited duty. Your NAVMed 6100/6, well, this is what the medical evaluation board is going to use to return you from unrestricted duty. And it's a good idea to know that LIMDU, that does fall under Navy medicine, right? That's the MTF that puts you on it as long as the commanding officer has convening authority. So these are all NAVMed forms. Another form worth mentioning, I don't think it's in the bibliography this time, but it might be in some of the references and some of the instructions, is your NAVPERS 6110/3, and this is your physical activity risk factor, your PAR-FQ, that we have to do twice a year in order to run the PFA. 6200 series, preventive medicine, a lot of preventive medicine. So we'll start with NAVMed. NAVMed form 6224/7, slant 8, and slant 9. And I think in some of the preventative medicine, it's a good idea to learn a couple of tertiary as well. So 6 medicine, 2 preventative medicine, tertiary 3 communicable disease, and then 4, this is what makes these all related to tuberculosis. So our 6224/7 form, right, that's the initial TB exposure risk assessment. This is the one that they're going to utilize to screen somebody who's a positive PPD reactor. Our 6224/8, this is your TB exposure risk assessment. This is the one you have to do annually. This is the one you do with your PHA to determine whether or not we have to do an actual tuberculosis skin test. We'll screen you, and if you answer concerning on that, then we'll test you. And then the 6224/9, the NAVMed 6224/9, this is your monthly evaluation when you're being treated for latent tuberculosis, when you're being treated because you're a PPD converter. And then 2 other forms that fall under preventative medicine, NAVMed 6230/4 and NAVMed 6230/5. These are our adult immunization record and then our child immunization record. Again, a good tertiary code to know. So 6 medicine, 2 preventative medicine, 3 chemoprophylaxis. So that's why our immunization records are labeled this way. And 2 more forms to be familiar with that fall under preventative medicine, 6260/2 and 6260/2 alpha. Well, these are your hazard noise warning decals, the 8x10, and then the label, the 2x2. And think about what these are doing. These are trying to prevent you from going into a noise hazardous area without the proper hearing protection. So that is why these forms are labeled under the Preventive Medicine SSIC code. Moving on to general medicine, the 6300 series, well, we have the NavMed 6310-1, and this is the individual 6-slip. This is what we use to put somebody on SIQ when they come to the battalion aid station or when they come to the clinic. We can also use this to document light duty on as well. We have the 6320-18. This is the binnacle list. This is used to excuse an individual from duty for a period of 24 hours or less, and is supposed to be submitted to the commanding officer by 0930 every day. And then our NavMed 6320-19, that's our morning report of the sick and injured, and that's submitted to the commanding officer by 10 o'clock each day, and it's used to excuse an individual for a period of more than 24 hours. And these forms can all be found in Chapter 23 of the ManMed. 6700 series has to do with equipment and supplies. Well, let's look at the forms that pertain to equipment and supplies. We've got the NavMed 6710-6. Well, this is our polyprescription medications. Okay, we got to think of the medications as a supply, so we use a NavMed 6710-6 to do our polyprescriptions. Then we have some other Chapter 21 of the ManMed forms, right? Chapter 21 having to do with pharmacy. So NavMed 6710-4, right? That's our narcotic and controlled drug inventory for 24 hours, 424. NavMed 6710-4, narcotic and controlled drug inventory for 24 hours. Our NavMed 6710-5, that's our perpetual inventory of narcotics. And our 6710-1, that's our narcotic and controlled drug account record. But just remember, when it pertains to pharmacy, that pertains to medical supplies, so that's why it falls under 6700 series. Some other forms worth mentioning that unfortunately I do not have a way to organize or break down or categorize really, because as you see, these are the DD forms, right, for Department of Defense. They don't fall under the Navy SSIC system. So DD 2807, that's an important form we need to know. That's our report of medical history. Our DD 2808, that's our report of medical examination. So always remember, history before exam. These are the forms we utilize like on your entrance exam when you're going to the MEPS. You fill out that DD 2807 that asks you all the questions. Do you now or have you ever had all of these symptoms? And then the DD 2808, that's the one they document the actual physical on. Another form worth mentioning is the DD 2697. This is for people who are separating from active duty, and this is the report of medical assessment. We got to remember this one will be forwarded to the VA, and they'll use that to kind of process anybody's disability. The DD 2766, this is our adult prevention and chronic care flow chart. This is found in section 1 of the medical record, and it gives us a snapshot of the patient's health. We've got things like all the health counseling you've done, any kind of medications they're on, any kind of occupational exposures they may have or screenings that they warrant. We've got the DD 2215, that's your reference audiogram. That's the audiogram you get at MEPS, and what all your audiograms will be compared to unless they reset your baseline. We've got your DD 2216, that's your hearing conservation data. This is what the rest of your audiograms will be documented on. So if you get in the hearing conservation program and you're doing an audiogram every year, they're going to utilize the DD 2216. We've got a DD 1289. DD 1289 is your Department of Defense prescription. Again, it's not listed as a 67 like the polyscript because this is Department of Defense wide. So that's why it's a 1289 and doesn't fall under the SSIC codes. We've also got the DEA 106. The DEA 106 is used for the report of theft or loss of controlled substances. So this one's important, and it always kind of sticks out in my mind because this is dealing with, the DEA. So if any controlled substance comes up missing, this needs to be filled out in the original, and a copy needs to go to the nearest DEA regional office. A copy of it needs to go to BUMED. A copy of it needs to go to the MTF region pharmacy representative, and a copy of it needs to go to the nearest NCIS field representative as well. Few more forms here. We've got the DD 2795. right? Our DD 2796, and we've got a DD 2900. Okay, and these are what we're going to document the pre, the post, and the post-deployment reassessment on. Okay, so we do that pre-deployment health assessment. We want to do that in about 120 days from that deployment date. We want to be in that 120-day window. The post-deployment health assessment, well, we've got a 30-day window plus or minus on redeployment. So remember in that instruction, redeployment means coming home. Okay, that means coming back from theater. So we can do the post-deployment health assessment 30 days before you come home or 30 days after you come home. 30, that window plus or minus from redeployment. And then the post-deployment reassessment, well, that is supposed to be 90 to 180 days after you get home. You shouldn't do it any sooner than 90, and it shouldn't be after 180, because after that, it is late. So that concludes this presentation on the forms. I hope, like the SSIC code presentation, that it makes some of these forms clearer to you, where you don't feel like you're just trying to memorize numbers for the sake of randomness, because I find that next to impossible. At least with our NavMed forms, our Navy-specific forms, we can see how they break down into those specific SSICs. So if you spend the time just learning the secondary SSICs, especially the medical ones, it's going to go a long way. You may not know every number down to the last digit, but if you got a multiple choice question, there's a very good chance you're going to be able to narrow it down to 2 reasonable options, if not 1, if you understand your SSIC codes. So when you're reading through this stuff, just make sure you're breaking them apart. Make sure you're going through and understanding why these are numbered the way they are, especially when it comes to our Navy specific forms. So like always, I hope that helps, and keep studying.